1:35 p.m. on July 4th, the unforgiving Tennessee sun seemed to radiate from every street corner in downtown Nashville. The holiday air carried the smell of barbecues and faint echoes of laughter from those preparing to celebrate Independence Day. Yet inside a condominium on Leah Avenue, the heat took on a different character altogether. A frantic 911 call sent dispatchers into immediate action, the operator's voice tense as details trickled in. 2 people had been found unresponsive, and there was blood everywhere. Paramedics and law enforcement rushed to the scene, sirens slicing through the sweltering afternoon. Some neighbors peered through their blinds, bewildered by the sudden influx of emergency vehicles, while others stood on the sidewalks whispering in hushed confusion. At first glance, the responding officers had no idea they were about to step into a case that would spark national headlines and leave an indelible mark on the city's collective memory. The door to the condominium cracked open, revealed a grim tableau. Former NFL quarterback Steve McNair, an idol to many in Tennessee and beyond, lay motionless. His body showed multiple gunshot wounds. Nearby was the body of a young woman, later identified as Sahel Kazemi. The immediate sense of shock was palpable, even among the seasoned first responders. One officer quietly radioed for additional support while the paramedics assessed the victims. Flashing lights danced across the walls, their intermittent glow illuminating the lurid details that would soon become crucial pieces of evidence. Cameras clicked methodically as forensic teams began to document every inch of the crime scene. The temperature inside the condo was stifling, no air conditioning blasting in the living area, and the hot July air seeped through the half-open windows, merging with the tension that seemed to thicken with every passing second. Each movement felt like it carried the weight of an impending revelation. Investigators on the scene whispered updates: 4 bullet wounds for the famous quarterback, a single fatal wound for the young woman. To the outside world, it would soon appear that the star athlete, once heralded for his leadership on the field, had been tragically caught in a violent confrontation. The question that emerged almost immediately was, why? In a matter of moments, rumors about Steve McNair's personal life surfaced, fueled by the presence of Sahel Kazemi's body so close to his. Detectives would quickly learn that she was someone connected to McNair's private world, a figure few in the public had even heard of before. The sirens, the clicking cameras, and the hushed gasps from neighbors set the stage for an investigation that would unravel a tangle of relationships and motives. This was a city that adored its sports heroes. McNair had led the Tennessee Titans to the brink of Super Bowl glory and had become synonymous with grit and determination. He was a beloved figure both on and off the field. That he could be found dead, and under such tragic circumstances, sent ripples of disbelief throughout Nashville. On this scorching holiday afternoon, while thousands of residents filled parks and backyards with the cheerful promise of a festive evening, an altogether different type of fireworks exploded inside that condo. As the first responders stepped outside to confer with senior detectives arriving on the scene, an unspoken question shimmered in the sultry air. How had a beloved sports icon's life come to such a sudden and violent end? While the clock ticked forward, more law enforcement vehicles converged on the scene. Reporters arrived soon after, cameras rolling, each hoping to be the first to deliver breaking news in a city about to be consumed by heartbreak and scrutiny. Behind the scenes, investigators knew they were on the cusp of a complex story, one involving fame, secrets, perhaps even betrayal. Yet no matter how this tragedy unfolded, a man was dead, a young woman lay beside him, and their families, friends, and a shocked public would soon be grappling with the repercussions for years to come. What followed would be an intense probe that delved into the lives of these 2 individuals. One a storied NFL quarterback, the other a 20-year-old who had taken a winding path to reach that fateful moment in Steve McNair's living room. As the sun continued its relentless assault on the sidewalks outside, inside that crime scene, an investigation was only just beginning, poised to uncover facts that were as scorching as the summer heat enveloping the city. Steve McNair was born in a small Mississippi town that nurtured big athletic dreams. From an early age, his life revolved around football and family. He grew up in a tight-knit household, one that valued discipline, spiritual grounding, and hard work. Known to be a respectful, driven young man, McNair excelled on the gridiron with a natural talent for quarterbacking that caught the eye of local scouts. Friends and family often recalled how he could turn any patch of grass into a makeshift football field, corralling neighborhood kids into impromptu games. Despite modest resources, his deep sense of perseverance and his innate leadership qualities shone through. By the time he was a teenager, local sports pages began chronicling his feats. He was a star in the making, though nobody could have predicted just how far his talents would take him. Off the field, Steve McNair was also known for his warm heart. He was equally comfortable with a fishing rod in hand as he was with a football. Hunting and fishing became an integral part of his downtime, a way to remain connected to his roots. These quieter activities allowed him to escape the mounting pressures of athletic stardom. Once he arrived at Alcorn State University, his prowess at quarterback was undeniable. He shattered records, garnered awards, and catapulted himself into the national spotlight. Despite his rising fame, he continued to be the approachable, laid-back individual his loved ones knew. His teammates respected him not just as a quarterback who could read defenses like an open book, but as a guiding force who would always encourage them to keep pushing, even in the face of certain defeat. Though he stepped onto the professional stage in the mid-1990s amid fanfare and high expectations, success in the NFL did not come overnight. Yet McNair's grit and perseverance never wavered. He became an icon in Tennessee when the Houston Oilers relocated to Nashville and transformed into the Titans. Fans admired the tenacity with which he played. He battled through injuries that would have sidelined lesser competitors, earning the enduring nickname Air McNair. He led the Titans to a Super Bowl appearance in 2000, coming within a single yard of tying the game in a heart-stopping finale. Although the Titans fell short, the moment encapsulated everything fans adored about him: his unwillingness to concede, even when the odds seemed impossible. With professional success came financial reward and celebrity status. He used these gifts to give back to the community in ways that felt deeply personal: summer camps for children, charitable initiatives, and donations to local schools in his hometown. To many, he was a role model, a living testament that a young man from rural Mississippi could scale the heights of professional sports while remaining humble and anchored to his origins. His family life also flourished. He married Michelle, and they had children together. Friends and acquaintances routinely described him as the ultimate family man, someone who doted on his kids and sought every opportunity to guide them. Yet beneath the polished exterior, as is so often the case in high-profile lives, private struggles and personal conflicts existed. By the time the public learned of his tragic death in 2009, the shock was twofold. First, that such a beloved figure could be so abruptly taken, and second, that the circumstances surrounding his demise were so wrapped in apparent scandal. When news outlets first reported that the young woman found alongside him was not his wife, speculation ignited across the media and among fans. The facade of the perfect family man began to crumble in the public eye. People wondered if they ever truly knew the star quarterback at all. And yet those closest to him would recall his generosity, his devotion to his children, and his unwavering loyalty to old friends. They would maintain that the man was far more than any single storyline. Much like the way a football game can never be summed up by one incomplete pass. Socially, McNair moved effortlessly among different circles. He was a local hero in Tennessee, revered by sports enthusiasts, admired by many in his community. He also had ties back in Mississippi, frequently visiting his hometown. Many remember him leading football camps for local youth, ensuring they saw a real-life example of success that stayed true to its roots. Even in retirement, he remained heavily involved in charitable endeavors, maintaining an easy rapport with business owners, fans, and local politicians alike. Yet, in the months leading up to his death, subtle cracks began to appear in his public persona. Friends later admitted they noticed he seemed more distracted than usual, juggling the demands of public appearances, family responsibilities, and, as it turned out, personal entanglements. While still outwardly affable, it was clear that something weighed on him behind that trademark smile. Those paying close attention saw the faint shadows of concern in his eyes. In the final weeks of Steve McNair's life, a quiet tension seemed to permeate his otherwise busy schedule. He continued to be a presence at community events, signing autographs and taking pictures with starstruck fans. Yet the pace of his personal life had begun to intensify. Some nights he would be spotted at restaurants or bars in downtown Nashville, often in the company of the same young woman. Whispers circulated. Did he have a new relationship on the side? Was there trouble at home? He still returned to his family, still made public appearances, still cultivated his regular guy image. But the veneer of normalcy was growing thin. On the final day of his life, which happened to coincide with one of the nation's biggest holidays, the city was alive with celebration. He was last seen in public earlier in the week, casually mentioning to a friend that he was looking forward to a relaxing weekend. No one anticipated that the next headline involving him would detail his violent death. With fireworks popping in the distance and American flags waving in the summer breeze, McNair's life ended in a condominium that had become a rendezvous point for him and Sahel Kazemi. To outside observers, it was incomprehensible how such a storied athlete, philanthropic figure, and adored father could find himself in such a tragic scenario. As for his state of mind in those final hours, it remains a matter of speculation and conflicting reports. Text messages and phone records suggest a man caught between obligations and desires, possibly feeling cornered by choices that had spiraled beyond his control. Some who knew him insisted he was trying to end the relationship with Kazemi gracefully, hoping to maintain his public image and respect for his family. Others believed he was in the midst of re-evaluating his life entirely, mapping out a future that might have included this young woman more permanently. No definitive proof emerged to settle those debates. What is certain is that, on that fateful 4th of July, Steve McNair's journey concluded, far from the cheering crowds and bright stadium lights. He died in a small, unremarkable living room, his final moments spent in the presence of someone who had come to represent both passion and turmoil in his otherwise composed existence. Sahel Kazemi was born in Iran under challenging circumstances. Her early childhood was marked by political upheaval and familial struggle, prompting her family to seek a more stable environment. Eventually, Kazemi found her way to the United States, a place she and her relatives hoped would provide opportunity and security. Settling in Florida at first, her family faced the usual difficulties of assimilation, learning English, navigating American customs, and figuring out how to build a future from scratch. Despite these hurdles, Kazemi displayed a spirited personality, forging friendships quickly. Those who knew her as a teenager described her as vivacious, outgoing, and eager to adapt to Western culture. The transition to young adulthood, however, was anything but smooth. Kazemi's family life was fractured at times, and she found herself seeking both independence and belonging. She would eventually drift away from her initial support structures, searching for a path that aligned with her aspirations. By her late teens, she had found a way to Nashville, lured by the city's booming tourism industry and a desire for a fresh start. There, she secured work as a waitress at various restaurants, learning the rhythms of a bustling southern city known for its music and nightlife. She loved fashion, was known to frequent local boutiques, and was not shy about socializing, occasionally partying into the early morning hours with a circle of acquaintances and new friends. Psychologically, Kazemi seemed torn between the dreams she harbored and the reality she encountered. She was prone to moments of intense optimism, hoping to climb the social and financial ladder quickly, and just as prone to bouts of frustration when life's complications overwhelmed her. Some described her as fiercely loyal, going out of her way to help those she cared about. Others saw an insecure young woman, vulnerable in a world that can be cruel to those without stable foundations. Despite her challenges, she displayed resilience and determination. She would switch jobs when necessary, sometimes juggling multiple part-time positions just to keep afloat. Even though she had no formal higher education, she was street smart, adept at navigating relationships and the hustle of day-to-day survival. By her early 20s, Kazemi had found a niche in Nashville's hospitality scene. The city's vibrant energy matched her personality, and she became a recognizable figure among certain social circles, including nightclub regulars and restaurant patrons. She had a flair for conversation that could put almost anyone at ease. Yet those closer to her noticed the cracks beneath the surface. She sometimes voiced dissatisfaction with her financial struggles and her desire to find a more stable life. In a place where everyone seemed to be chasing a dream, be it music stardom or personal reinvention, Kazemi fell somewhere between chasing hers and getting lost in the shuffle. She had also begun to accumulate minor infractions, like traffic tickets, which pointed to a young woman grappling with life choices that offered little room for error. The social context surrounding Kazemi was a tapestry of contrasts. On the one hand, she floated through a scene where meeting influential people was entirely possible: nightclubs, restaurants, and bars frequented by celebrities, athletes, and the city's elite. On the other hand, her daily life remained grounded in the struggles of someone living paycheck to paycheck. She took pride in presenting herself well, often dressing stylishly even when her bank account was near empty. She was also known to date men who offered a taste of the aspirational lifestyle she craved. When she eventually met Steve McNair, it was as if two worlds converged. He was a high-profile athlete with name recognition, and she was a hard-working waitress whose charm and ambition belied her youth. From the outside, this relationship might have seemed improbable, but for Kazemi it presented a chance to break free from the cycle of barely making ends meet. Yet, as their liaison deepened, Kazemi seemed to undergo a shift. She became more emotional, more prone to anxiety, possibly aware that dating a married celebrity would bring complications she might not be fully equipped to handle. Conversations with her colleagues hinted at a woman torn between excitement at the prospect of a glamorous relationship and the emotional toll of secrecy. In the months before the tragedy, she confided to friends about wanting clarity from McNair, asking him where the relationship was going and whether it would ever be more than a hidden arrangement. Some friends saw her behavior become erratic. She'd alternate between glowing optimism, showing off gifts she claimed were from McNair, and moments of despair, plagued by financial and emotional stress. Her final days painted a picture of a young woman at a crossroads. The backdrop of her story featured a DUI arrest and rising tension in her personal life. She had also reportedly learned that her financial burdens were far from resolved. It is unclear to what extent McNair had promised to support her, but it was evident that Kazemi believed she was entitled to more security than her life was currently providing. In that precarious state of mind, on the cusp of either forging a new path or losing herself entirely, Sahel Kazemi spent her last hours in the company of the man she both loved and resented. Those final moments, abrupt and bloody, would forever seal her place in the annals of Nashville's most shocking crimes. As for her evolution into a perpetrator of violence, no one could have predicted such a trajectory. There was no major criminal history, no known propensity for weapons, and no record of violent behavior. Close friends and coworkers were stunned to learn that she was implicated in the murder of the famous quarterback. Yet, in retrospect, hints surfaced: the increasing strain of her personal life, her emotional volatility, and her desire for a resolution that seemed elusive. Whether fueled by desperation, jealousy, or a mental break, it remains impossible to definitively say what snapped inside her mind. But snap it did, and her final act left two families shattered, and a community struggling to reconcile the persona of a kind, lively young woman with the reality of a murderer. The days and weeks preceding the crime were a complex tapestry of tension and deception. Steve McNair, still beloved by many in the community, was seen out socially with Sahel Kazemi on several occasions. Photographs surfaced of the couple dining together, and rumors circulated about the extent of McNair's involvement with the 20-year-old waitress. Meanwhile, McNair was also juggling responsibilities to his wife and children. This delicate balancing act appeared to be taking a toll on him. Confidants mentioned that he seemed more withdrawn during social gatherings, occasionally looking over his shoulder as if anxious about who might be watching. Kazemi, for her part, had grown increasingly vocal about her desire for clarity. Did McNair plan to leave his wife? Would they move in together permanently? What was the future of this relationship? In the final weeks, Kazemi's emotional states fluctuated wildly. She had moments of triumph, bragging about McNair's gifts, a Cadillac Escalade he helped her finance, elaborate dinners at upscale restaurants. Yet she also worried aloud about her deepening debt, the car payments that were proving difficult to keep up with, and the nagging suspicion that McNair might never make their affair public. Friends caught glimpses of arguments between the pair, often hushed but intense. The financial strain weighed heavily on her. She confided to at least one coworker that she felt overwhelmed by bills and feared losing everything she had worked so hard to obtain. The 4th of July weekend arrived, and the city prepared for fireworks, barbecues, and patriotic festivities. McNair reportedly spent time with Kazemi that Friday, discussing, according to some accounts, her recent concerns. Although no definitive record captures the exact nature of their conversations, phone logs indicate multiple calls and text messages between them leading into the late hours. At some point, McNair left Kazemi and returned to his own affairs, perhaps trusting that they would reconnect the next day without drama. Yet the stage was set. The tension that had been simmering for weeks was now close to boiling over. That Saturday, Independence Day, dawned bright and hot. Kazemi was seen running errands, stopping by a local store and making a few calls. Security cameras showed her alone, her posture tense, her expression pensive. Some reports suggest she purchased a firearm a few days prior, although the precise timeline of that transaction remains a subject of debate. Later in the day, she connected with McNair at the condo. Whether they argued or sought a calm discussion is unknown. The neighbors heard no raised voices, no signs of disturbance, until the unmistakable crack of gunfire echoed through the walls. The crucial triggers that led to that final act remain elusive. Kazemi's close friends were at a loss to explain why she would escalate to lethal violence. Yet a perfect storm of emotional desperation, financial worry, and jealous frustration brewed beneath the surface. The statements she had made earlier in the week about feeling doomed if she lost McNair's support hinted at the psychological corner she might have felt backed into. Meanwhile, McNair, described by teammates as calm under pressure, may have underestimated the severity of Kazemi's emotional state. Whatever had been said or decided in the last moments, Kazemi clearly saw no path forward, but a tragic, irrevocable choice. The crime scene itself, discovered on that sweltering July afternoon, told a story of abrupt, devastating violence. Steve McNair was found slumped on a couch, inflicted with multiple gunshot wounds, 2 in the chest, 2 in the head. Fired at close range, the shots appeared deliberate, aimed to ensure a fatal outcome. Blood spatter analysis would later indicate that he might have been dozing or resting when the shooting began. The living room showed minimal signs of struggle. A half-eaten meal, a few bottles of beer, and scattered personal items suggested a casual environment rather than a confrontation in progress. Nearby lay Sahel Kazemi, a single gunshot wound to her head, the weapon found beneath her body. Investigators meticulously combed through the space, documenting every speck of evidence. Shell casings littered the floor, each bullet accounted for. The gun, a semi-automatic pistol, bore no obvious sign of tampering. Detectives quickly secured the condo and began the painstaking task of collecting fibers, fingerprints, and any digital devices that might yield clues about the final moments. McNair's cell phone lay on a side table. Kazemi's purse was found on the floor, with some of her personal effects spilled out, as though dropped hurriedly. The front door showed no sign of forced entry. Nothing appeared ransacked or stolen, suggesting that robbery was not a motive. Medical examiners later confirmed that McNair's wounds were consistent with a sudden attack, likely without warning. The precise sequence of shots pointed to an execution-style killing, especially given the 2 headshots. Kazemi's fatal wound also appeared self-inflicted, the bullet path and powder residue around the entry site reinforcing the theory of a murder-suicide. Yet, for a brief period, speculation ran rampant about possible third-party involvement. Could there have been someone else present who engineered a staged scene? Police found no compelling evidence to support that idea. Forensic analysis of the apartment's door locks and windows showed no unauthorized entry, and neighbors reported no visitors besides McNair and Kazemi. Within minutes of the first responding officers arriving, the immediate aftermath unfolded in a surreal blur. Forensic photographers captured images of McNair's body, once so full of life and athletic prowess, now lifeless on a piece of living room furniture. Kazemi's body, draped on the carpet, underscored the tragic finality of what had occurred. An acrid smell of gunpowder and blood lingered in the air, mingling with the oppressive heat that crept in from the outside. Those who entered the condo carried with them a sense of shock that would not soon fade. Within hours, law enforcement sealed off the perimeter, keeping curious onlookers and the press at bay. The medical examiner's team arrived, carefully moving the bodies to begin a more detailed examination. Digital devices were bagged for analysis. Phones, laptops, anything that might illuminate the events leading to these tragic deaths. Detectives initiated a wide-ranging effort to interview family members, friends, co-workers, and neighbors, eager to piece together a timeline. By that evening, the headlines exploded. NFL great Steve McNair found dead in apparent murder-suicide. A hush fell over Nashville, a city enthralled by fireworks just hours earlier, now stunned by the cataclysmic end to one of its most beloved sports heroes. Kazemi's actions after the shooting were limited to a single gunshot that ended her own life, leaving minimal physical evidence of her immediate post-crime intent. There were no frantic phone calls, no letters left behind. She had, however, sent cryptic text messages to friends in the days preceding the murder, hinting that she was losing control of her life. One text read, "I'm tired of dealing with everything." Another mentioned feeling betrayed. Through these digital breadcrumbs, investigators inferred that Kazemi likely planned the murder-suicide ahead of time, though whether she had fully made up her mind before entering the condo remains impossible to confirm. The evidence trail then relied heavily on ballistic analysis, forensic testing of gunshot residue, and the digital records of both Kazemi and McNair. Investigators uncovered text messages indicating tension in their relationship. Bank records showed Kazemi's account nearly depleted, highlighting her financial desperation. Surveillance footage placed them both at the condo around midday on July 4th, soon before the murder. Witnesses at a nearby store recalled seeing Kazemi looking anxious, though she made no statement that would foreshadow violence. Within a matter of days, authorities had pieced together a narrative that pointed almost exclusively to Kazemi as the shooter. Ballistics matched the gun found beneath her body, and the trajectory of the bullets matched where she had stood in relation to McNair. Gunshot residue tests indicated she had fired the weapon, and the pattern of the final, self-inflicted wound was consistent with suicides. This was not a staged scene or a carefully orchestrated murder framed to look like a suicide. It was, by all accounts, precisely what it appeared to be. The immediate phase of the investigation, often referred to as the critical first 48 hours, was marked by intense scrutiny from both the media and the public. Steve McNair's celebrity status ensured that the pressure on law enforcement was enormous. The first steps taken by the authorities involved cordoning off the crime scene, protecting the integrity of the physical evidence, and coordinating with forensic specialists to expedite analysis. In parallel, lead detectives began scheduling interviews with key individuals. Family members, colleagues, and friends of both McNair and Kazemi were questioned, allowing investigators to build a timeline of their final days. During these initial hours, rumors ran rampant. Some media outlets speculated about a possible love triangle, perhaps involving a third unidentified individual. Others hinted at involvement by organized crime, an absurd theory that gained brief traction online before being dismissed by officials. Law enforcement calmly reiterated that they had found no sign of forced entry or additional parties at the scene, and that the evidence strongly suggested a murder-suicide. What weighed on them, however, was the public outcry. Fans of McNair wanted assurances that his killer, if there were one, would be brought to justice. The notion that Kazemi had acted alone leading to a tragic suicide was too unsettling for many to accept. As the early investigation progressed, detectives seized every opportunity to gather more data. They obtained Kazemi's phone records, reviewed her recent communications, and checked local firearm databases to trace the origin of the murder weapon. Meanwhile, they interviewed the neighbor who made the 911 call, confirming that no disturbances were heard until the shots rang out. Police also consulted traffic camera footage and business surveillance tapes from the surrounding blocks, searching for any sign of suspicious activity. Some leads proved to be dead ends. Tips poured in from self-styled amateur sleuths or people simply seeking attention. Each was systematically verified or disproven. The depth of forensic examination was extensive, focusing on the ballistic match for the bullets found in McNair's body and the bullet that killed Kazemi. Gunshot residue patterns on her hands corroborated that she had fired the weapon. DNA swabs confirmed her handling of the gun. The shell casings recovered near the couch matched the serial batch from the semi-automatic pistol found under her body. Investigators also meticulously analyzed the splatter patterns of blood and the relative positions of McNair and Kazemi's bodies. The final arrangement suggested that McNair was attacked in a vulnerable position, likely seated or reclining. The absence of defense wounds on his body supported the theory that he was either asleep or severely caught off guard. Evidence processing became a priority. Clothing from both victims was bagged and analyzed for trace elements. Samples of carpet and couch fibers were tested for gunshot residue patterns. All digital devices, McNair's cell phone, Kazemi's cell phone, and McNair's laptop, were examined for text messages, emails, and call logs. Piecing together these fragments, investigators were able to recreate a grim timeline. Kazemi arrived at the condo, presumably confronted McNair about her mounting anxieties, possibly culminating in an argument or emotional plea. The first shots ended McNair's life. Seconds later, Kazemi turned the gun on herself. After the initial shock subsided, the case continued to develop as more personal and contextual details came to light. Investigators examined McNair's finances, searching for anomalies that might suggest extortion or blackmail, but found nothing to support such theories. They also delved into Kazemi's recent spending patterns, phone conversations with family in Florida, and text messages to friends. A clear picture emerged of a young woman spiraling under stress, financially strapped, emotionally exhausted, and fearful of losing the relationship that had become her lifeline to a more secure lifestyle. For detectives, a critical breakthrough lay in securing the purchase history of the firearm. Records indicated that Kazemi had bought the gun just days before the murder. Employees at the store where it was purchased recalled her being quiet and somewhat apprehensive, but they had no reason to suspect ill intent. She filled out the required paperwork, passed the standard background check, she had no significant criminal record, and walked away with a lethal instrument. This discovery effectively nullified the need for any intricate conspiracy theories. The simplest explanation, though devastating in its simplicity, was that Kazemi had planned to kill both McNair and herself. For the community, the legal proceedings that followed were minimal, owing to the fact that the primary suspect was dead. There would be no arrest or trial to follow. Yet various aspects of McNair's life came under public scrutiny, including his marriage, his finances, and his final days. Headlines questioned whether more could have been done to prevent the tragedy. The legal system's main function in this case was the coroner's inquest and the final ruling on the causes of death. With Kazemi deceased, prosecutors had no defendant to charge, and the court saw no reason for a drawn-out inquest. That left the public hungry for closure in a situation that the judicial system could not fully address. Still, the aftermath involved certain formalities, such as official statements released by law enforcement concluding that the case was a murder-suicide. Typically, a high-profile murder investigation would involve grand jury considerations and pre-trial motions. Here, the final statement from the police chief served as the closing argument. He stood at a podium, cameras flashing, and confirmed that all evidence pointed to Kazemi as the sole perpetrator. No additional arrests would be made and no further legal processes were expected. In that sense, the resolution arrived swiftly, though it provided little solace to McNair's widow, his children, or his countless fans. The rest of the legal dimension revolved around estate issues, insurance claims, and the distribution of McNair's considerable assets. Because of the turmoil surrounding his marital status and his relationship with Kazemi, complex questions arose about potential claims on his estate. Ultimately, the law recognized his widow and children as the rightful heirs, though the entire process was overshadowed by public intrigue. Lawyers for the McNair family had to navigate the delicate matter of addressing rumors and allegations about his personal conduct. Yet none of these proceedings took place in the public spectacle of a trial. They were handled quietly through civil courts and estate lawyers. For Kazemi's family, there was little recourse. They mourned their daughter while grappling with disbelief that she could commit such a violent act. Because Kazemi had no assets to speak of, and no estate worth contesting, her family's involvement in post-crime legal matters was mostly limited to funeral arrangements and personal grieving. Some members of her family questioned the official narrative, wondering if there might have been more to the story, but without evidence to the contrary, their suspicions remained unresolved. The immediate effects of McNair's murder reverberated throughout Nashville. His wife, McKelly, was inundated with an outpouring of sympathy from fans and the local community. At the same time, she wrestled with the painful realization that her husband had been conducting a relationship outside their marriage. She made only a few public statements, thanking fans for their support and urging them to remember her husband for his achievements and his love for his family. The city's sports community was particularly devastated. Former teammates spoke at memorial services, sharing fond memories and stories of McNair's leadership and kindness. An impromptu shrine sprouted outside the Titans stadium, where fans left flowers, jerseys, and handwritten notes. Radio stations dedicated segments to grieving the loss of Air McNair, inviting listeners to call in with tributes. The shock and sadness were ubiquitous, uniting a city in heartbreak. Simultaneously, the tragedy underscored to many the fragility of personal relationships, even for those who appear to have everything. At barbershops, churches, and coffee houses, discussions turned to the question of infidelity, secrets, and what triggers sudden violence. While some were quick to condemn Kazemi, painting her as a gold digger or emotionally unstable, others sympathized with her struggle and suggested that the pressures of her life and McNair's unkept promises had pushed her to the brink. Regardless of where one stood, the conversation highlighted stark truths about mental health, the burden of fame, and the hidden turbulence that can lurk behind even the warmest of smiles. For McNair's family, the aftermath involved immense public scrutiny. His children faced an onslaught of media coverage, forcing them to confront a deeply personal grief in the public spotlight. Close friends organized fundraisers for the family, while local churches held vigils. In the weeks following his death, local channels replayed highlights of McNair's career, eulogizing him as one of the greatest athletes to grace Tennessee sports. Grief counselors visited his children's schools, prepared to support classmates who had questions or needed to process the tragedy. The stoic resilience displayed by his widow became a point of admiration for many, though it was no doubt a crushing weight for her to bear. Longer term, the tragedy cast a shadow on the broader community. The Titans organization, initially unsure how to handle the swirl of rumors about McNair's private life, eventually embraced a narrative that celebrated his football legacy while acknowledging the complexity of his final months. This approach aimed to preserve his iconic status while subtly cautioning young players about the pitfalls that accompany sudden wealth and fame. Several players, staff members, and coaches privately noted the incident as a wake-up call, recognizing that off-the-field issues can escalate tragically if not addressed with honesty and care. And while systemic changes stemming from this crime were minimal, it wasn't the type of case to prompt major legislative reforms, given that it was an isolated act of interpersonal violence. However, it did spark community dialogues around mental health and gun access. Some groups lobbied for more rigorous background checks and waiting periods for firearm purchases, pointing to Kazemi's ability to acquire a handgun despite her precarious mental state. While no sweeping changes immediately took hold, discussions percolated in local government and advocacy organizations. In the realm of professional sports, the incident served as another reminder of the importance of mentoring and support systems for athletes who often find themselves managing sudden fame, large incomes, and complex personal lives. Historically, the murder of Steve McNair remains a stark inflection point in Nashville's modern timeline. The city had endured its share of violent crimes, but none had claimed such a revered public figure. The sense of loss extended far beyond football fandom. McNair had been a pillar of charitable work, giving back to communities in Tennessee and Mississippi. His philanthropic efforts had inspired local youth to believe in the power of perseverance and community service. His untimely death, and the manner in which it occurred, ignited a debate about the real cost of stardom, the pressure to maintain an image, the the stress of living a dual life, and the emotional domino effect that can lead to unforeseen tragedy. The years following the case saw a shift in how the public discussed domestic issues involving celebrities. While the McNair case did not spur direct policy changes on a grand scale, it served as an example in conversations around mental health, relationship violence, and the responsibilities of public figures. The name Steve McNair became synonymous with a cautionary tale about the hidden dangers lurking in seemingly enviable lives. For fans who had spent years chanting his name in packed stadiums, the grim final chapter of his story served as a reminder of the delicate balance between public persona and private reality. A decade later, retrospectives in sports media looked back on the case with a mixture of reverence and regret. Footage of McNair's heroic plays and stoic leadership peppered these stories, followed by somber commentary on the turmoil in his personal life. Such programs often ended with a statement that those who knew him best held on to the belief that, despite his faults, he was a man who cared deeply for others. They and many fans still wrestled with the idea that a single rash act could eclipse an entire lifetime of good deeds. Meanwhile, Kazemi's role in that story remained a more complicated legacy, an embodiment of how desperation and heartbreak can culminate in irreversible devastation. In the grand scheme, the case stands as a testament to the fragile line that can separate love from violence, passion from despair, and success from its darker shadows. Steve McNair's story highlights both the triumphs of an extraordinary athletic career and the perils that can lie in wait when secrets fester. The narrative also underscores Sahel Kazemi's plight as a young woman whose dreams of stability and happiness were shattered by emotional turmoil. From a broader perspective, the tragedy underscores that society's idols are, in the end, mortal and vulnerable to the same entanglements, mistakes, and heartbreaks as anyone else. The convergence of fame, secrecy, and mental distress proved a lethal combination, leaving a trail of tears that still haunts Nashville, the NFL community, and the families of both victim and perpetrator. Looking back on the tangled story of Steve McNair and Sahel Kazemi, it becomes clear how multiple forces aligned to shape a fatal outcome. He was a beloved athlete juggling fame and personal burdens. She was a young immigrant searching for financial security and an emotional anchor in a city brimming with opportunity yet rife with pitfalls. Their paths collided under circumstances that might have been thrilling at first, secret trysts, lavish gifts, but ultimately devolved into heartbreak. The final days leading up to July 4, 2009 form a cautionary tale of simmering tensions that can abruptly boil over when illusions of control crumble. In reviewing the most significant evidence, law enforcement focused on the firearm purchase, the ballistic match, and forensic proof that Kazemi fired the fatal shots. Cell phone records further validated the murder-suicide theory. Key turning points included Kazemi's spiraling financial stress, the intensifying arguments over the nature of the relationship, and McNair's inability or unwillingness to fully extricate himself from a perilous situation. Though some initially speculated about more complex conspiracy theories, the simplest explanation, one of a tragic love affair ending in desperate violence, proved the most consistent with the physical and digital evidence. All lines of inquiry led to the conclusion that Kazemi acted alone, killing McNair before taking her own life. The case's resolution, though swift and conclusive, left few feeling satisfied. Officially, the Nashville Police Department declared the matter closed, citing murder-suicide as the final determination. Yet the aftermath haunted the community for years. Some fans continued to hold on to doubt, wondering if essential details were left undiscovered. But the fundamental narrative remained unchanged. McNair, a sports legend and civic leader, was gone, leaving a grieving family. Kazemi, a troubled young woman who once harbored dreams of a better life, had left behind a legacy of confusion and regret. Perhaps the greatest tragedy was that, had she reached out for help, or had others recognized the warning signs, this might have been prevented. Legally, the case set few precedents, as it concluded without a trial, but it did serve as a focal point for discussions about gun access, mental health, and the responsibilities of public figures. Some local lawmakers introduced bills recommending extended waiting periods for handgun purchases, Though none passed into law at the time, organizations dedicated to mental health awareness used the tragedy as a teaching moment, highlighting how stressors like financial strain and emotional instability can lead to catastrophic decisions if left unchecked. On a social level, the city of Nashville was forced to confront its idolization of celebrity athletes, recognizing that even heroes have vulnerabilities. The tragedy also drew attention to the challenges faced by young immigrants like Kazemi, who can find themselves caught between cultural expectations and the harsh realities of survival in a new land. In the long run, the story of Steve McNair's murder is woven into Nashville's cultural memory. Though time has softened some of the rawness, each anniversary of his death brings fresh tributes and recollections of his contributions both on and off the field. Younger fans learn of his legendary gameplay and the heartbreaking circumstances of his final hour, understanding that icons, too, are human. For those closest to McNair, the passage of years has not erased the sorrow, but they have worked to preserve his legacy in ways that accentuate his generosity and competitive spirit. His foundation continues some of his charitable work, and scholarships in his name encourage young athletes to excel academically. Meanwhile, Kazemi's story is often relegated to a footnote, her name remembered primarily as the perpetrator of a headline-grabbing crime. Yet a deeper look into her life reveals the tragic complexities that led her to that fateful moment. A young woman with dreams of financial security and emotional connection, undone by circumstances she could not manage. It is a story that speaks to the vulnerabilities lurking behind outward appearances, and a reminder of the high stakes involved when relationships become entangled in secrecy and anxiety. If there is a collective lesson to be drawn, it is that tragedies rarely happen in a vacuum. McNair's celebrity did not shield him from the all-too-human vulnerabilities of infidelity and emotional conflict. Kazemi's youth and ambition did not inoculate her against despair. The final, irreversible act represented a collision of these vulnerabilities, setting off a ripple effect that impacted families, friends, fans, and an entire community. On an even broader level, it underlines how fame can distort reality, sometimes obscuring the cries for help that resonate just beneath the surface. Legacies, for better or worse, are built on both triumphs and failures. McNair's achievements on the football field remain etched in sports history, exemplifying resilience and leadership. Kazemi's legacy, while far darker, serves as an urgent example of how emotional and financial pressures can converge to disastrous ends. Nashville's memory of that sweltering 4th of July in 2009 endures as an unsettling testament to how fleeting life can be, and how the path from love to violence can be heartbreakingly short. Looking ahead, the city and its inhabitants strive to keep the positive dimensions of McNair's spirit alive. Stories of his charitable deeds and mentorship efforts continue to inspire local athletes. His foundation organizes occasional events like youth football camps, reminding everyone of the ideals he championed: perseverance, teamwork, and giving back. For fans who followed McNair's career from the beginning, the painful final chapter does not erase the joy of his game-winning drives or the pride he brought to Tennessee. Instead, it adds layers of complexity to his legacy. He was a man of great promise, felled by personal complications that speak to the universal struggles of balancing love, ambition, and accountability. Ultimately, the McNair murder case stands as a sobering narrative of how quickly the American dream can turn into a nightmare when secrecy and despair converge. It is both an emblem of Nashville's modern history and a cautionary tale that transcends the city's borders. The conversation it sparked about betrayal, mental health, and the weight of public expectation continues to echo wherever the line between private life and public persona grows thin. In the final analysis, it reminds us that behind every famous face is a human being, prone to the same missteps and misfortunes as anyone else, and that behind every tragic headline lies a web of lives altered forever in an instant. The story of Steve McNair and Sahel Kazemi remains a poignant lesson in empathy, awareness, and the urgent need for intervention when red flags appear in relationships. Perhaps that is the real takeaway, that amid the sensational headlines we should never forget the very real pain that pervaded both lives, leading to a day when everything came crashing down. In their memory, one can only hope that others might learn to recognize the warning signs, to speak up and to reach out before tragedy becomes inevitable. The complexities of the McNair case underscore the importance of taking stock of our own lives, our relationships, and the pressure we place on ourselves and others. If there is a call to action here, it might be to remain vigilant to the emotional currents swirling beneath the surface in those around us. Should you or someone you know find yourself in a situation fraught with desperation and the possibility of violence, reach out for professional help or confide in a trusted friend. Sometimes a single conversation can diffuse tensions or spark a path toward healing. If we learn anything from this tragedy, let it be that silence and secrecy can be lethal. If you're reading this account and wondering how you might respond if faced with similar situations in your own community, consider sharing resources for mental health hotlines, domestic violence shelters, and crisis support with your friends and family. Make room for open dialogue about the emotional and financial burdens that can corrode relationships from the inside out. Encourage empathy over gossip and constructive support over judgment. While we cannot rewrite the ending for McNair and Kazemi, we can each do our part to prevent a repeat of such a tragedy in our own circles. Your thoughts and insights are welcomed. Do you believe that this case could have been prevented if either party had sought help sooner? Have you or someone you know experienced the weight of hidden pressures that sometimes push individuals beyond the brink? Please consider sharing your perspectives or starting a dialogue with your local community group or online forum. By exchanging stories, experiences, and advice, we can foster a more understanding and proactive community. Let us know if you think certain warning signs were missed, or if you feel there are systemic changes that could prevent similar outcomes in the future. Through collective engagement, perhaps we can glean lessons that resonate well beyond one city, one famous quarterback, and one young waitress whose paths fatally converged.